Let's get chilly.
Hello and welcome back to Let's Chill, the official and unofficial Minnesota Wind Chill, Minnesota Strike podcast. I'm Jeff,
I'm Jay.
And I'm Kane.
and we're back. We took, I think, officially a 2 week hiatus, one intentional, one not. I mean, the one intentional was a bye week, the one non-intentional. We had some technical difficulties, but we are back. We're live and ready to talk Frisbee again. Um, yeah, it's nice to be back. The bye week felt longer than just a week for me. I don't know. It felt like a long time since Winchell have played. But so tonight we're gonna preview a doubleheader weekend. The Winchell are traveling on the road to Chicago on the 4th of July, and then after that on Saturday the 5th, they're going to Detroit. I think it's the 5th. It might actually be a Sunday game. I didn't actually check the date for that. Um, but they're gonna be playing Detroit Mechanics. So we got a lot to cover. But first, before we do that, we're gonna kind of preview the playoffs. I think there are officially four playoff spots still open. But the Central Division is locked. All three playoff teams are in, and so we've got some talking to do. Kane, do you want to kind of preview, at least from your perspective, the Central Division playoffs as they stand right now? Home field advantage isn't secured or anything, but
Yeah, so seeding isn't secured in any of the divisions, if I'm correct. I don't think any.
I think so.
Correct. Yeah, you're
Okay,
right.
okay. I think like not even like number one in the East, which is interesting because Boston's 8-0 and they still could get knocked out of first place.
Mhm.
Um, anyway, so the three teams from the Central so far are Chicago, who's in first place in the Central so far, um, Minnesota, and then Madison. I was really surprised to see that Madison had clinched with a what three and or what 6-3 record or whatever. It's just so funny to me that like this early in the season we have the Central cleanse or all three spots in the Central and all three spots in the West already.
I know it feels early, but there's only 3 weeks left of the season.
Yeah,
Well, this
it's
Like
was
this
decided
is
last week though,
true. I mean,
so I guess 4 weeks left in the season to me is enough. Where I'm like, okay, that's interesting for two divisions to be set. You know, it'd be more interesting, I
and
guess, if seeding was set, but
yeah,
obviously
I was gonna say
yeah.
seating is so open, so that kind of makes more sense. But
that's fair. But yeah, but yeah, like you said, that is the Central Division. We are looking at this weekend. We'll preview the game more. To me, what is most likely is going to be Chicago, Minnesota again. Madison, all respect to them, they put a really good games up this season. I think they've shown that they're building, but in their appearances against Minnesota and Chicago, they just did not compete at the level they needed to. And so I think in the Central, we are looking at Minnesota, Chicago again.
agreed. And it's really just basically a question at this point of who's hosting and who gets that bye week. Um, Jay, I'm going to pass it to you because this weekend will kind of potentially be a preview, and it'll be a very important, if not critical, game for Minnesota against Chicago.
Yeah, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, just the three of us, about how yeah, this is most likely a Central Division championship matchup. And
Mhm.
one that we haven't seen since 2022. Because in 23 it was Minnesota Alley Cats and last year it was Minnesota Radicals.
Yeah,
So Chicago hasn't actually made it back to the Central Division Championship game since 2022. This will be their first time in 3 years. And that's assuming that they do make it. Now, Chicago does have a relatively speaking easy schedule ahead of them. They play Detroit one more time, they play Minnesota, and then I believe they finish out against Pittsburgh and the Alley Cats. So they have a relatively easy schedule ahead of them. Or sorry, Pittsburgh and Madison. Um, but again, it's possible that the Union drop two games. One to Minnesota and one, who knows, maybe to the Radicals.
hmm
And if that's the case, if Minnesota can come away beating Salt Lake, that would put Minnesota at home field advantage and also kind of leave a sour taste in Chicago's mouth. Um, so I do think that this Friday's game is very important. I If Minnesota wins it and wins out the rest of the season, it could be the deciding factor on home field advantage.
If Minnesota loses to Chicago, do they automatically give up first place in the division? I mean,
I think so.
unless Union like lose out, right? Or like
No, I think even if the Union lose out at that point, because we lose both head to heads, then
No, it's
it,
it's
they have four
theoretically
games.
possible. So
Okay,
Minnesota
so
could
oh,
finish
they have four.
10
I
and
thought they only
2
have
and
three.
Chicago could finish 9 and 3. It's very unlikely, but technically possible.
but for all intents and purposes, because the Central Division is very weak. Like, I mean, it is. It's really not that competitive. You can kind of pencil in those wins and losses right now. This is a must-win game, more or less.
And I one step further, it's a must win by five or more goals,
Right,
realistically.
because to get the head-to-head, right? Is it
Yeah.
five or is it 6 goals?
So
Oh,
it's
I guess
it's
five to tie,
six.
six to beat,
Six.
right?
It's I'm pretty sure that they actually
It
have to win
has
by
to be six
six
then.
because Chicago will have the in division seeding against Minnesota
Right.
because Minnesota's playing an extra out of division game. So
Okay.
Hmm.
Chicago will have
The
the
advantage.
better yeah, the
Yeah.
better wins. So
Okay. Okay. That makes sense. So yeah, it really is then a game where Minnesota has to show up as a championship team. Like they
Yep.
cannot wait for playoffs to start taking it seriously. Like this could be this is round one of the playoffs, if you want to look at it like that.
Yeah, it really is. Even though there's a couple weeks after this, this is the yeah, this is it. This is the preview of that. Um, let's talk really quick strength of schedule going into that, regardless of this outcome of Friday. We I want to talk more about how the wind chill are playing tougher teams to close out the season while Chicago is playing easier teams, and then how that bye week could affect it. So let's just assume, I'm not trying to be pessimistic, but let's just assume Chicago wins this weekend, or whatever the case may be. Chicago has home field advantage for the playoffs. Okay, Minnesota is closing out their season. I had the schedule up. If anyone has a schedule, you can just shout it out. But
yeah, so they finish against Chicago. So tomorrow or Friday's game against Chicago, Saturday's game against Detroit. Then the following week they play the Radicals. And the week after that they have another doubleheader where they travel to Salt Lake to play the Shred, and then are back at home on the Sunday to play the Mechanics.
so a tougher schedule compared to Chicago by far. And then that assumes again that they don't have a bye week. If Chicago gets home field advantage, they get a bye week, where Minnesota would then host the Madison Radicals. How does the rest of the schedule, whether we host or not the playoffs, affect that likely championship game against Chicago?
I think regardless of what the game outcome on Friday is with Chicago, Minnesota, whether it's a win or a loss, I think Minnesota has the better opportunity to refine themselves before the playoffs, whereas Chicago kind of just has to like keep it together, if that makes sense. Um, I think this is another test for Minnesota this Friday, and if we do get a win here, we then get a chance to build some momentum. Whereas if we get a loss, we get a chance to build momentum. Either way, we get that opportunity to kind of bounce back. Uh, whereas Chicago, I feel like this game is going to leave a taste in their mouth a lot more strong, a lot stronger than it will for Minnesota, win or loss for them.
Okay, I agree with every point that you made up until that last sentence. I think this game is too far out to the end of the season where they still have 4 games left, right? Or three, whatever it is. Where I think that they're gonna lose the taste of this in their mouth. If we're going with that analogy, I think they're gonna forget about this game because even if they're not really focused on the Radicals or Detroit, like they still have to play them, they still have to play a game. Where like
And we'll have passed.
exactly, I'll be like, oh yeah, right. We have to get back into a more competitive game where
Right.
it's Minnesota. But again, there's always that question between rest and rust. And will Minnesota be so tired after traveling to Salt Lake, after playing against the Union, even Madison, like right, we play Madison? Yeah. Um, where it's like that's not a give me game, it's a so
You did that, yeah, that's true.
so yeah, like it'll just be interesting to see. Jay, I want to hear your thoughts about this.
I sort of agree with Kane, where if Chicago loses to Minnesota, not to say that they're, not going to beat Pittsburgh or they're not going to beat Detroit, but like
Mhm.
they can't lose anymore. And they have to beat Pittsburgh the next day or the Sunday. Yeah. Then so they also play doubleheader. So if they lose to Minnesota, they have to beat Pittsburgh the next day. And yeah, the week after they play Detroit and Madison, but they play Madison on the second day of a doubleheader. So it's
True.
possible they drop that game. So I like sort of agree with Kane where it's like, this taste, it's gonna stick in their mouth a little bit. If they lose to Minnesota, it's like, oh crap, we can't lose again. Because if Minnesota goes out and beats Salt Lake, I don't think Minnesota's losing to Detroit even after intense travel. I'm just
Hmm.
gonna put that out there.
Agreed.
And I think if then Chicago does get a win, that'll also stay with them, because they're, I will say one thing about Chicago, they're a very confident team. They are very confident in their system. And if they do have another win against Minnesota at home, even though they do have another 3 games after that, I think those 3 games aren't really going to be anything to them at that point. So,
Yeah. Yeah, say what you will about Chicago, but they are very confident and they have very good chemistry. Like you said, Kane, their system, it's like they can plug in anyone and it's like, yeah, they know what they're doing. They might not be the best skilled, but they're very well put together. I think, in my opinion, not to bring this back too far, but almost like the wind chill during championship weekend last year. Like you didn't have to be the best team, you just had to be the best put together. Um, and Chicago is looking like that. So, any last thoughts on playoff preview before we get to this weekend preview?
can we do a real quick mid check-in for like who we think will represent each division?
Yeah, good. Yeah, good. Good. Go ahead.
But okay, I'll do Minnesota Central. I do have Atlanta out of the South still. Love Atlanta this year. I'm gonna take this is spicy. I'm gonna take New York in the East. I'm
Whoa,
gonna
they're
take
not
New
even.
York in the
Yeah, they're not even
uh,
clinched.
yep, I know. And then I got Salt Lake in the West.
I'm gonna take Minnesota. I'm also gonna go Atlanta. Atlanta's looking good. I honestly don't think they'll win, weirdly enough, but I think that they'll win the South pretty easily. Um, Out of the West, that's still kind of a wild card for me. I don't know the West too well, so I think I might just take Salt Lake. It's kind of the easy choice for me. Wow, am I really taking all like number one seeds? Because I was gonna say Boston. Boston looks pretty undefeated, like unstoppable. I want to see the Breeze take it, but I think I'm gonna go Boston.
Yeah, I'm throwing curveballs all left, right, and center.
Yes.
Um, Out of the Central, it's got to be Minnesota. I think even if they don't have that home playoff, for the championship, I still think they're gonna, come in and beat Chicago. Out of the South, I think I have to go like it might be the hustle. I think I should say the hustle. I have been liking, what Carolina's been putting together at the back half of their season, but I do think the hustle are just gonna be able to clinch it out. And that's, assuming Carolina can even make the playoffs. I think they're in a must win right now. So out of the West, I'm going with the Spiders. They are too hot. They're too explosive. I think if any team's going to beat Salt Lake, it's going to be Minnesota in a couple of weeks. But then the Spiders in that championship game out West. And then in the East, yeah, I'm going to go with the Phoenix. I think
What?
yep, yep. No, I'm going with the Phoenix. They're gonna be the Hotbirds. Minnesota is matching up against the Phoenix at championship weekend, round one.
No way.
Round one. Round one
That's
matchup. They're gonna be the ones.
crazy.
They're gonna be the 1 seed and the 4 seed.
That's
This
I'm
crazy.
is
calling it now.
these are the takes we're here for. There's no bigger Oakland Spiders fan than Jay, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
love the
true.
Spiders, dude.
They
They're
were
so good.
legit too. Yeah. They were legit at the beginning of the year. I mean, they
I
still are, but like,
yeah.
yeah.
I seriously believe the Spiders can win the whole thing. I think they are probably the second or third best team in the entire league right now.
Oh yeah, that's not yeah,
They're
that's
looking
fair.
good. Okay, I think we should move on here to get the preview. I do want to say one last thing, just for context, especially for newer listeners, newer fans, but also those like OGs. The last time Chicago and Minnesota met in the Central Division, in fact, the last two times, could not win. So again, this is very likely, whether it's at home or away in Chicago. Like some nasty Central Division championships have occurred between these two teams. So I'm very excited, but also just good context to have. Like that's a monkey off the back that we have not really addressed. So the Winch will have to beat Chicago. Yeah. Anyway, that's just for background. Um, Jay, do you want to hit us with your keys to the game? Or, I mean, I can do players to watch too. I guess we don't really know what we do first, but
Um, yeah, I can roll with keys to the game.
All right.
All right. So my first key of the game is to play the stats. Um, so just some things. Believe it or not, Minnesota has the highest red zone conversion percentage right now.
Whoa.
They have 88%. The Empire is the next highest at 86.9%. There's a hidden nice in there.
I
Um,
was,
yeah, so the Windchill are actually like the best red zone team in the league right now. And they're good. The Union, on the other hand, are the 10th best, and they're sitting at 80.5% in the red zone.
Well,
So that's about 1 in 5 times they don't punch it in well in the red zone. So that's a stat you can like play off of. Put extra
uh,
pressure on Chicago when they're in the red zone. You know that they're not doing the greatest there. If you can, make them struggle there, where they already have been struggling this season, that's a good stat.
I like that. I think a stat, I hope I'm not getting to your next key. I don't know what it um, is force them in the end zone then. I don't have their stats up right off the bat right now, but I don't know how their hucks are. I don't know how their general completion percentage is. But let's just say they're the most efficient hucking team right now, and they do have some pretty good handlers. Um, Stop the huck, force handler movement, that slow completion, get them in the red zone, and then force a turn. I mean, obviously you want a turn before the red zone, but by playing the stats, getting them into the red zone, you can take advantage.
Yeah, you're so right. But the Hucks, that's the next stat I was going to bring up. They are the worst team on Hucks right now.
Oh,
They are
wow.
they are
Okay.
literally they're the worst team hucking right now in the whole league.
Okay.
Every team is better than them.
So how are they scoring? If they can't get in the red zone, they can't huck it. It's good.
that's
Big
So
Bubbles
crazy.
like, yeah,
so
yeah,
actually, despite being 8-0, they're like the 12th highest scores, like total scores. In 8 games, they don't have like that many scores. They have 188.
yeah,
So like they're not winning their games by a huge margin.
yeah.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, they kind of are because they're holding opposing teams to low numbers. Their scores against is actually the best in the league at 105,
Right.
and Minnesota's is the second best at 108. So yeah, playing the stats of the Huck completion percentage, the red zone completion percentage. Also, how are they scoring 30 yards out of the end zone? It's not a Huck, it's also not the red zone. Just a
Exactly. I mean, I
so yeah,
know.
yeah. Push the
I was being
don't let them
stupid.
play. Don't let them play that middle area.
Yeah.
Another stat is looking at completion percentage. They're in the bottom half of the league of overall completion percentage.
Mm.
Um, they're better than the wind chill and completion percentage, but as we know, wind chill don't take very many passes, but the Union do. So, force a lot of throws, play those numbers, play those stats, force those turnovers, get them into the red zone where you put extra pressure on, and when they're looking deep, be defending deep as well. So
Mhm.
just play the numbers that are in your favor.
Yeah, I like your call out for the red zone stat. You guys know I've been harping on offense and like the necessity for consistent offense this year. Um, I think it's good to hear that Minnesota has the number one red zone because that makes me feel like validated in saying that like a championship level team. I mean, just Jay, where's like Boston at in that stack? Just curiosity. If you have it
In
up,
red zone conversion,
yeah, within like top five.
uh,
My point, I guess, then is going up against a team like Chicago, who has a lot of confidence, who has built this system and has built this season where they've made a name for themselves and kind of like made a statement for themselves. I think just taking it back to being consistent, not doing anything super fancy, like you said, playing to the numbers, knowing that once you get the small ball game going, once you get within that last 20 yards, it's almost a lock. You just have to play consistent and keep it chilly. And so I really like that red zone call out. I think there's the extra layer there, like I said, of just staying chilly that Minnesota has been doing really good on this season. And I think that they can't let Chicago like disrupt that or gunk it up.
yeah, totally agree. Um, and my second key to the game will, I think, segue into Jeff's players to watch fairly well. It's play the person. So, you know, Chicago, like we talked about earlier, like any person can really slot into any role. So just be ready for that. Be prepared to, no person is going to be on the field and, oh, I'm only a handler. I'm only going to be looking for resets and then long hucks. That's not Chicago's play style. That's not what they're going to do. You need to be ready for any person to do anything on the field at any time, which
Mhm.
means when you're, on a turnover, if it's a defensive point for Minnesota, Chicago's going to be playing good defense. You need to be
Mhm.
playing like Chicago's going to be playing good defense. If Chicago gets a turnover on defense and they're getting their defensive point, they're going to be playing good offense. Minnesota needs to play good O-line defense as well. So it's not just, these stats are important. There are times when Chicago struggles and when Minnesota excels, but also the personnel on Chicago is really talented, and you need to be prepared for that talent from every player, 1 through 7 on both lines.
Yeah, I think with Chicago has always like when Jeff earlier you said they've always had like that monkey on our back. They've kind of always been our bigger brother. I feel like Chicago has also won a lot of the 1v1s, and I'd like to see Minnesota take a few of those back. Like you said, Jay, play the matchups. Um, don't try and do anything fancy like I was saying earlier. Just play consistent frisbee and take it home.
Yeah. I will transition to keys or to players to watch then, because one of my players to watch is going to be Paul Krennic. Paul Krennic, first of all, just shout out to Paul, to PK, shout out to Will Brandt, Justin Burnett, and Kyle Suflo. They all are coming home from U24 Worlds with gold around their necks. So congratulations to all four of you guys. Um, PK, this is his second gold medal now. He has the ability to be that matchup for any player that you need, like Jay that you were just saying. Um, Typically, he's been played on defense the last few seasons. Um, I think I had a stat here somewhere, but no, I don't know. He's been this year almost exclusively, not exclusively offense, but significantly more offense. The last few seasons, he's been primarily a defensive player. Interestingly enough, Pavel Giannis in the last few seasons he's been with Chicago, he's played two defensive points the whole season, like 2022, 2021. This year he's played a much larger split. He's played 53 defensive points and 16 offensive points. Um, so point being, like, yeah, they're flexing people where they need to. Pablo Giannis is an O line handler, but he's not this year. GK, on the other hand, I think can be that matchup where he's kind of going the opposite way. Of like he has been their main, not a main, but mostly D line guy. Now he's switching to offense, and I'm really liking to see that. Here's the stat I saw. He has a lot of goals this season. He has more goals this year than he has any other year except for 2022. I think that I don't have his page pulled up anymore, but the season's not over yet, and he's gonna surpass his most goals scored in a single season. Um, Point being, he's scoring a lot more. He's on offensive a lot more. And it's been really kind of fun to see him. So I'm curious to see like if they're gonna flex him at all, how they're gonna play him. Is he gonna be on defense, or is he gonna be just continue on offense, kind of with those maybe less traditional matchups like Pablo Giannis?
I love
I think that's
PK.
a, I think, yeah, yeah. I think that's a really good call out. PK is a two-time gold medalist. And we've seen him, championship weekend 2023. He like matched up against Grant Lindsley, who was considered one of Salt Lake's best players, and he shut him
Mm-hmm.
down for a lot of that game. I have
Mm-hmm.
that. There's a clip of him skying him, I believe. I believe that was Lindsley. Anyway, PK is that guy. He is really good. Um, Super fast, ridiculously fast. About 6 feet tall, I think, is what his stat is. 6 foot 6'1", somewhere in that range. Um, yeah, two-time gold medalist. So his talent is, international. Um,
Yeah.
and he has been having, a really good season this year. 11 goals, as Jeff mentioned, and he's been doing pretty good. He still has 2 blocks, and he's thrown 6 assists as well. I will say his completion percentage. I mean, 93% isn't horrible, but also that's something that you want 95 plus. So that's the only real weakness I feel like he has this season.
I actually had in my notes too. I actually want to see PK on defense this game with all of the matchups, the offensive matchups they have, with his speed and with his ability to sky. So I have kind of two and a half players to watch because I also want to see Bevon on defense. Bevon's ability to sky and play a lockdown D, like but get those 50-50s. Because Kane, I think you mentioned there's been a lot of 50-50s that have gone Chicago's way. Those players who can make that impact and shift those 50-50s over closer to maybe 60-40 Minnesota is going to be key. So, yeah, I agree. His speed, his height, his ability to sky. I want to see him on defense. Watch for him on defense. But yeah, I'll be curious to see.
I
And
do
then
think
also Bevon should be on defense.
I do think building off of that, those two will probably be the first D prime line.
Yeah, let's see it. There will be no D prime line or O prime. Sorry. Okay. All right. I'm getting confused. We're not going to get broken, is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
No,
Go
I
ahead,
like the
Kate.
PK call. I was just gonna say that I think, yeah, he brings a lot of energy. He brings a lot of playmaking ability when he is on offense, or on defense as well. So yeah, I think having his energy on the field, having his speed and quickness to kind of counterattack the Chicago would be good. So shout out PK. Get him on the pod.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're listening, PK. Okay. My second player to watch is going to be Sam Berglund. He's only played two games this season. We all know that he had an injury most of last season and most of this season as well. And so it's kind of, I think it's his time. I think he's kind of itching to really make an impact on the team. And I think that this game is going to be the one to do it. And this also goes for Detroit as well. Maybe PK's player to watch too. But I think Sam Berglund. I think he can have a really good get right weekend, especially against Detroit. But mostly focused on Chicago here. We need a big defensive presence against Chicago. I just talked about it with PK. I think PK and Bvon need to both be flex to defense. Sam Berglund is also going to be that guy who needs to show up on defense. First of all, we all know his pulls are great at pinning, opposing offenses. We know it gives the defense time to set up. But I also really want to see him make an impact on a turn. I want to see him captaining that defense when they get the disc, being that main handler, that QB, if you will. And again, making an impact because those break points are probably going to be pretty rare, those break opportunities. And I think Sam Berglund can have a really big influence in when they occur and how they occur.
I love this call out. I think Sam Berglund. I've been waiting for him to have a good season all
Mm-hmm.
season. I feel like we've been kind of checking the roster every week. We've been waiting to see if his name was on there.
Mm-hmm.
I think last or 2 weeks ago, whatever, he threw that one assist that made a couple highlight reels that were like, was
Yeah,
just
that
like
was crazy. It was
a
like
flick or
woven
whatever. Yeah,
through.
like
Yeah,
the
that was
woven
crazy.
flick or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like that. I think one thing Minnesota has to excel on, to Jay's point earlier, is when there is a turn, being able to capitalize on that consistently, whether or not
Mhm.
that's a turn on offense or a turn on defense.
Right.
The way you have to be able to capitalize on it, and make the plays. I think Berglund has always had a really strong ability. Berglund and Bergmeyer, I think this like combo of
Yeah.
the follow through and the I guess the bookends ability on defense. And so I'd
Yeah.
like to see, yeah, some production out of him for sure.
I think following up on both of that and the throw, Berglund has said before that his favorite throw is his flick hook. If it's open, he's taking it. Um, and I think he knows when it's open. Like
Mhm.
he does have, quite a few throwaways. Um, but that being said, a lot of them are on like flick hook opportunities. So it's less of a throwaway and more of losing out on a 50-50. It's like Jeff
Sure.
was sort of saying earlier, if we can be winning on those 50-50s,
Hmm.
then Minnesota is looking pretty good if Berglund's on the field because he can get the disc anywhere he wants on that field.
Yeah.
So
And yeah, if you have PK, Bevon, and Burt on the field as three big targets for Berglund, like the stats are gonna, I think, lean toward you in your
it's
favor.
wraps.
Yeah. I also want to call it just like a few quick players to watch, or notable Union players. Actually, they're players almost not to watch. Sam Kaminsky is dressed, not active, so he'll be available, but he's not like rostered, which is interesting. I don't know if there's history there or what. Xavier Payne is not rostered at all. That's important because Xavier Payne, um, from the Alley Cats to the Union this year, has the most completions and the most throwing yards and the most assists on the Union this year. He's been very efficient and very impactful with the disc in his hands. So it's gonna be kind of a relief not to have Xavier Payne on the field against Minnesota. However, Brandon Van Dusen, um, will be the one to contain. He's basically the number two to Xavier Payne. He's only had 7 throwaways with 164 completions, and he has the second most throwing yards and assists on the team after Xavier Payne. So kind of watch for him, see who's going to be matched up on him, and how we're going to contain his throwing game. So just a couple interesting players I noted.
We're gonna put Pollard on him and it's reps. All right. So that's Friday, Chicago. Do we want to talk about Detroit at all?
I mean, I kind of touched a little bit. Like, I think
I
Sam
guess
Berglund.
yeah. I feel like keys to the
Yeah,
game and players to watch almost can overlap a little bit. But
absolutely. I want to see Sam Berglund, at least if he can't make an impact in Chicago, I want to see his get right game in Detroit is my note. So,
yeah, I like that. That's fair. Yeah.
yeah. But it's gonna be a good weekend. It's gonna be a big weekend. Friday is gonna be, it's Friday night fireworks, literally, figuratively, like it's going to be the boom.
This is gonna
I'm
be
it's gonna be fun.
super excited.
It's
I
it's
work
a
and I'm
I
hoping
know, yeah.
that it's dead at work.
It's 4th of July, so it probably will be. So, but yeah, I mean, it's a potential, very likely championship division preview. So it's going to be a good one. Let's watch it and cheer and get ready to welcome them back home whenever they're back home again. I'm really bad at looking at the schedule and like preparing, but
No, not 17th. 17th they travel. The 11th then.
the 12th looks like
12th.
it.
Yeah, the
They're
12th.
The
hosting
12th, the
Madison.
12th
Yeah,
against Madison.
Yeah.
yeah. So
That's
that's
right.
next week. Okay. All right. Well, any last thoughts from you two?
No, I think I'm just very excited watching Frisbee this weekend.
Heck yeah.
Heck yeah.
All right. Well, we'll see you physically in person next week on the 12th, but virtually against Chicago and Detroit. In the meantime, stay chilly and ka-chow.
Ciao.
Julie
Stay
Kachow.
chilly.